everyone. Thanks for hanging around. Sorry about the little bit of delay getting that going, but we are set and ready to talk about audio fiction. Audio fiction is a bit of a brave new world right now where there's incredible things that are happening all across the industry, both in the professional realm with big Hollywood productions, but also in the independent realm with things happening. Now, I'm getting a connecting problem, so if you guys are having trouble hearing me, letting me know. It's just telling me that there are some network errors with the WebEx system. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a PowerPoint prepared, which I've put up into the meeting notes on the sketch, as well as a list of all the audio dramas I'm highlighting through this. And we're just going to kind of lightning go through, give an overview, and then we can chat and talk about anything that you guys are interested in learning more about when it comes to audio drama. So welcome to the Introduction to Audio Fiction. This is a beginner's guide to the wide world of audio entertainment. It's not exactly, although I'm happy to answer questions about production, this isn't from a production side. This is more if you're a new listener to the realm, or if you only listen in one niche and you want to know what else is out there. So this is to give you a broad idea of what sort of audio is being created for your listening pleasure. My name is Eddie Louise, and I'm a novelist and an audio drama podcast creator who builds speculative fiction worlds on the page and for the ears. I'm the author of the hit audio drama, The Tales of Sage and Savant, and the novels of the Transmigration series. I am still getting network errors, so if you're having trouble hearing me, let me know. So, a brief history of the art form of audio fiction. The old idea of audio fiction is the radio drama. It's a dramatized, purely acoustic performance broadcast on radio or published on audio media such as tape or CD. And much of American radio drama is restricted to rebroadcasts or podcasts of programs from previous decades. There is still quite a community of radio fiction in that older sense that still happens in other countries, most especially in Great Britain through the BBC. But the new audio art form is a vibrant and growing creative art form centered on telling stories through sound. Audio drama provides a very intimate experience for listeners, which creates very committed and enthusiastic fans for your writing. Podcasts versus audio fiction. What is the difference? This is one of those places where we're going to get into the types of fiction because there's a very broad thing. Technically, everything that's broadcast over the internet is a podcast, but they fall into a series of different categories. So a traditional audio drama is a straightforward scripted stories presented as if the audience is a fly on the wall. Diegetic fiction is the found footage of the audio world. These stories are pieced together from archival recordings, or they're presented as a broadcast from a fictional source. Welcome to Night Vale's a prime example of that. Anthology fiction. These are the short stories of the audio world, and they can be independent shorts or monster of the week style narratives. Existing IP. These are tie-in audio for stories that exist in other formats such as film, TV, graphic novels, or books. Actual play RPG is storytelling through live gameplay and interactions. And finally, I couldn't think of a category name for this last. These are the people that are expounding the boundaries. They're choose your own adventure shows, or their improv shows, or wrapped storytelling, and many, many more. So we're going to kind of break into what we have with some of these different types. So in the traditional audio drama, this it can sometimes be confusing for people because they think of the term of as drama as being a somber story. But in this case, when we say audio drama in relation to uh, podcasts and audio, we're talking about acted stories. So drama in the case of acting. So I have put up here a few of my favorites, and this is literally just a few, but I wanted to kind of show you the diversity of what we have here. So starting in the upper left, we have Wooden Overcoats, which is a fantastic tale about an undertaker. It's comedic and ridiculous in the British farce tradition, and it's wonderful. Next to that is Harlem Queen, which is a serious history of a numbers runner, a very famous woman in real history in the Harlem Renaissance. Less is Morgue is a story that is best described as a zombie radio hour. I don't know. It's one where they definitely play with the idea of creatures being part of our regular world and only some people being aware of it. Victoriosity is a steampunk alternate history with a robots in Victorian time, and it's a detective story on top of that. That's just the first row. Now, I'm not going to go through everything on every screen because I've got a lot of screens to get through, but I just wanted you to see how the different things are. Within here also, we have the classic zombie story of We're Alive, which is a post-apocalyptic survival story. We have Margaritas and Donuts, which is a rom-com. We have my own show, Sage and Savant, which is a time travel mad science show. We have the Carlotta Botox Chronicles, which is a story about a girl trying to get a leg up in Hollywood. So a variety of stories in a variety of ways. And one of the things I've put up for you in the at the end of the sketch, I'm sorry, is a PDF of each one of these shows that I've highlighted and their discussion of what they are. So you can take a look through those and find shows that you're going to enjoy. In diegetic fiction, I will remind you that this is the type of fiction that comes from found audio or a contrivance of some sort where you're listening into something that you wouldn't normally have access to. And this can range from the bright sessions on the upper left, which are notes that a therapist is making while she does therapy for very talented individuals, including those with superpowers. You have on the other end of that line, you have the Amelia Project. And the Amelia Project is a wonderful story about a group that makes people disappear and helps them reinvent themselves in new lives. And what you're hearing are the interviewers' tapes while the Amelia Project decides to take on a death or not. The Girl in Space right next to the Amelia Project is one of the favorite. That's literally a personal journal or diary recording of a girl in space. Bouncing around a little bit, Moonbase Theta Out are official dispatches and reports from a moon base which is being closed down. So it's the final period of time. The engineers are needing to do everything to secure and get ready to get the rocket home to Earth. Relativity is also set in space, but that's one with a gentleman on a spaceship that wakes up and everyone else on the spaceship is dead. And it's his conversations back and forth with ground control. So as you can see, there's quite a variety of different ways that people are using diegetic fiction and creating the worlds that you get to experience through that. Anthology Fiction, and we have a number of people here at Con this weekend that produce Anthology Fiction, including SB Divya and the Escape Pod. This is a bare minimum of what's out there in anthology. There are thousands of choices if you want anthology. LeVar Burton Reads, of course, is sort of the master of this genre, and he pulled that out from his old Reading Rainbow. And in LeVar Burton Reads, he's reading adult stories. But it is the same wonderful host that you grew used to Reading Rainbow, and the same respect for the story coming forward. Other stories create a world through connected short stories. So the Old Gods of Appalachia is one that's new. And they are a series of interconnected stories on the myth and folklore of Appalachia and the old gods that live in the mountains. And it is fantastic the way they weave the stories together, even though each story is a standalone. The Big Loop is sort of similar. It has that follow. I want to point out one that I have a lot of fun with. It's the Boring Books for Bedtime. And the Boring Books for Bedtime is read by narrators who are working to keep very calm and very even tone so that you can go to sleep. And they read real books. So they'll read something written by a scientist, or something written by a historian, or something written by a philosopher, and lull you to sleep. I once got the opportunity to spend 10 years in Scotland. This was my midlife crisis, and I got to spend 10 years in Scotland going to university and pretending I was young again. And during that time, I learned a lot about Robert Louis Stevenson. And Robert Louis Stevenson wrote a book about Edinburgh and the delights of the city of Edinburgh. And that's one of the books that Boring Books read. I'm probably the only person that kept me awake listening to it. The rest of you will find that a great way. If you have trouble going to sleep, it's a great way to lull yourself to sleep. Existing IP is a big, broad world, and it contains everything from audio treatments of old books like Anne of Green Gables or The Lost World or Sherlock Holmes, to tie-in specifically created for audio episodes of things like Star Trek, and Doctor Who has a lot of specific episodes that were created for audio. But also we're finding new things like the adaptation of Sandman, which is a hotly anticipated one. I've been able to listen to the first 2 episodes I got to listen to in advance of production, and it's gorgeous and it's wonderful, and you guys are going to be over the moon on that. Wolverine, the Marvels, etc. But this is also a category where some really fun things happen. So Fan Wars is a rom-com that is based on 2 fans of Star Wars that are absolute opposites of how they interpret the various fan theories. And over the course of their podcast, while they are arguing these fan theories, they fall in love. So ostensibly, there's a whole lot of Star Wars in that, but then they've used it as the framework to build a great study. And then I'd also like to point out 2 that are on here, Lore and Welcome to Night Vale. Both of those have multiple other tie-ins, television shows, books, graphic novels, and other things that tie it in together. And a lot of existing IP is a new way to branch out something either that existed in audio first and then you branch it into other things, or alternatively that started as some other thing and then you brought it into audio. So there's a ton. And again, this is just scratching the surface. Actual play RPG and game related shows. I lumped these together, even though they can often have very different production values, because the world of games is so very rich, and there are so many RPGs out there and so many systems to play in. And I love the fact that people are taking the different approaches. One approach is to do an actual play, to have live players there, to improv, to roll your dice where it's necessary, or to make decisions where you're being guided by a game master. And the other is to take a game world and then write a story within that. And that means that you can end up with this really diverse way of engaging with the games. And oftentimes you can find multiple podcasts for a single game system. And some of those will be story based, and some of those will be live play based, and some of those will be discussion based. So, for those of us that get really obsessive about games, the world of RPG and game related shows is amazing. I'd like to give a special call out to a Ninth World Journal, which plays in the Numeria world. Did I say that right? Numenary. I'm missing a syllable, and I don't have anyone here to correct me. Ninth World Journal does a wonderful job, and I actually got a couple of friends who'd never played any RPG and who knew nothing about gaming systems into games by having them listen to a Ninth World Journal, because the story is so involving. And the world is so rich that once they were into the story world, they wanted to know more and get. So that's, if you need a great way. The in between is a wonderful concept. That is an in that happens in between. You know how so often in RPGs you meet your fellow adventurers in the inn or in the pub. Well, in between, all the stories are set in that inn. And that makes it a huge, huge lot of fun. And especially if you've been playing for a while, you're going to pick out tropes and things that have happened to you and the sort of discussions, and it's just a joy. So 20-Sided Stories is one that tells a variety of different game stories. They do them generally in blocks where you can find your way through different RPG systems and different things, which is fantastic. And finally, our category of expanding the boundaries. The big thing for me that put something in here was a sense of otherworldliness in some way. So, for example, the paired pod is conversations between yourself or the main character and an Alexa-like device. And it gets very surreal very fast. And because they've based the story in that digital assistant world that we're all living in, it is very strong. The Elaine's Cooking for the Soul is absolutely fantastic. The story behind that is a dentist in the post-apocalyptic world who is basically doing survival cooking, but trying to do it like a recipe show that we would have now. And every episode has a real recipe with it, as well as the story. There's a number of musicals on here. Audio is experimenting with how to add music in. And it's everything from a direct musical like 36 Questions, which follows a typical musical theater format, to Childish, which is based on a character who is processing through beats and movement like Childish Gambino, and they're paying homage to Childish Gambino, but also moving beyond Gambino in their work. And that character's growth is very deeply tied into the music. Hit the Bricks is a light travel through Oz with bright and bouncy songs that will get you going. So there's a lot of different things if you're into musicals. In Strange Woods is a brand new one out from the same people who brought us Bright Sessions. And I'm hearing really fantastic things from it. I've only heard the first 10 minutes of the first episode, but I hear that that's fantastic. Other things here in the Expounding the Boundaries world that I really want to point out is the way that creators are being very, very innovative with the way that they use the medium. So Greater Boston is made up of both true things that are happening and true things that are actual history in Boston, and a fictional story that interlaces with those true things to make a world that is just a little off from ours, but it feels entirely plausible. And we have a lot of friends and family who have traveled to Boston and listened to that, riding the trains in Boston and keeping up with that. And it's just fantastic. Whichever Path is a choose your own adventure story. And what they do is they, at each episode, leave you with an A-B decision. And they leave that with the audience, and the audience votes. And they have a few days to vote and choose the way of the story. And then the story changes the way the audience has voted. So I think they're on their 5th generation of story, maybe their 6th. You can go back and listen to all the completed ones, but you can also join in on the current one and get yourself up to speed and then vote along with everyone else. And that is a huge amount of fun. Moonface, which is there in the middle, was a astounding and unique look at Korean Americans and the language. How do you communicate with an elder who speaks Korean when you've been raised entirely American and we're not taught Korean? And that communication barrier through language, and they use that very effectively in the storytelling. Forest 404 is a completely immersive soundscape that, in addition to astounding sound design in the podcast itself, they have 25-minute, this is how we built the sound. This is where we pulled the sounds from. This is why this sound was important. And it's all underscored by a very beautiful score by Bonobo that is just absolutely mesmerizing. And then a couple others I want to point out here. The walk is not a workout. It's not like Zombies Run, which probably should have been on this list now that I'm thinking about it, but it's not like Zombies Run where it's designed to help you work out. But in a way it is. The story takes place in real time on a walk from Inverness, Scotland to Edinburgh, Scotland. And I don't know exactly how many miles that is, but that's about a 4-hour drive. So it's a long walk. And if you were to put that into your headphones and listen to that story while you took walks, that would help your health. But it's really interesting how they very, very carefully have parsed the audio to match up with that real-time distance that they're covering. 100 Words of Astounding Beauty is a flash fiction writers podcast where you are given a limited amount of time to write 100 words and in a competition basis, and it's wonderful and great fun, and you'll be amazed at some of the stunning things that people can come up with that. And lastly, Broken Alaska on this page is one that is completely improv, 100% improv, even though it's a full cast. And that one is a huge delight. So within here, there is so many different ways that people are challenging how story works in audio form and how to make it work for an audience. And there's something for every taste. A quick note on audio fiction discovery. iTunes used to have the complete, monopoly on audio discovery. And in recent times, that's broken out. You can find audio on Audible. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it in apps. There's a number of apps that are out there. I use Podcast Addict, but there are dozens of them. But also one that I really, really like is Podchaser. Podchaser does not yet have an app, although they promised me that one will be coming. But they are a great discovery, kind of like a Goodreads for podcasting. There's places where you can review episode notes and leave your own reviews of either episodes or of a whole show. You can connect with creators of the different shows, and they have the ability for people to make lists. And people have made lists for pretty much everything that's out there. So let's say that you were interested in gameplay podcasting. You can go and do actual play podcast list, and it will give you 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 lists that other people have made of their favorite RPG based actual play podcasts. You could say you want romantic comedy podcasts. Again, there will be lists that people have made. So it's really great to help you find new fiction and do that. And finally, if you are a person who's interested in making your own podcast, I advise you to go to the podcast host. The podcast host is a great jumping off place where you can learn the basics of how you need to get set up, what's best practice for a website and for hosting, your RSS feed, and for distribution and for marketing. It's also, they have a great fiction podcast weekly newsletter that you can receive, which will keep you abreast on all the major landmarks for shows, casting notices for shows, uh, articles about best practice in sound design or in finding Foley sounds or in creating music. And so it's just a really great resource if you're interested in that. And now we're kind of at the Ask Me Anything portion. Again, my name is Eddie Louise, and those are all of my contact. You can email me at eddielouise@Sage and Savant. You can engage on Twitter at Eddie Louise. Visit my websites, www.eddielouise.com or www.sageandsavant.com. And I can now stop my sharing, and then if there's anyone who has any questions, throw them in the chat. Okay, it's showing me in Toast Room A that people are typing, but it's not coming up. Instead of me sitting here being awkwardly silent on a video that they're just going to have to cut at the end of this, I am going to go ahead and stop the video, and then I'll come out and join you guys and answer any questions you have. Oh, I do see Quinn's question has come through. Do you like giving tailored audio drama recommendations? If so, do you mind if I hit you up on Twitter? I don't think it's absolutely. Hit me up. I absolutely love connecting people with their next obsession. And so because I've been doing this for a long time, and I know a ton of the people who make fictions, and I can connect you to pretty much anything you're interested in. Crystal says that I'm not familiar with anything about audio drama. I came because I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. You mentioned Foley sound, and I Googled it, but I could use an expansion of the concept or why you think it's neat or you don't. So one of the things, Foley is named after a gentleman, it was his last name, who created the first sound effects in films when films went to talkies. And it's the art of Foley is about taking one item to make a sound that will mimic another. So, for example, a great sound of a fire is using a piece of cellophane to scrumple up that kind of goes around fruit baskets, you know, the stiff plastic cellophane. And if you scrumple it up and then you just pulse it like this with your hands, it will make a crackling flame like a campfire. Um, so rice in a tub makes a great gravel base where you walk shoes across the rice and it will sound like gravel. So Foley is its own art form. And there are people who make Foley sounds and then throw it up on the internet to share out on freesounds.org. But what we found is that in order to control the sound quality, we liked doing our own Foley. It also became something that we were able to do to give fans some fun. So, for example, we had an episode on Sage and Savant where they're pirates and bodies get thrown over the edge of the deck into the water. And in order to do the Foley for that, we got the cast in their swimsuits, and I'm in Southern California. We went down to our swimming pool at the apartment complex, and we literally took turns throwing each other into the water with one of us holding the microphone up and getting the recording of the different sized bodies and the different impacts in the water. And we ended up with some really, really killer great sounds of bodies hitting the water that we could use in our thing. And so that kind of can become its own rabbit hole. And some shows do a lot more Foley than other shows do. And it really kind of depends on whether it serves the story or not, whether you should use it. So yeah, Foley sound is definitely one of the coolest things, I think, because it's so interesting once you get in it. Another one that was really fun is a plastic cup like the red, you know, solo cups that are at every frat party. You tie a button on a string, poke a hole in the cup, and thread the string up so the button is inside the cup. And then you hook a dowel, a simple little, you know, dowel that you hook the string around the dowel, and then you pull with the dowel like this. And that place where the string meets the hole on the cup, it will start creaking like you hear on a show like Black Sails, where you hear the ship creaking. That's how you get a creak. You can also build bigger creak boxes using rope and wood to create a creak box that has a crank on it to get something of a bigger sound. That's a lot of fun. Celery gets used a lot because celery has a lovely snap or break that can easily be manipulated in your sound to create a variety of different sounds, including breaking bones, you know, breaking stair rails, breaking chairs, anything like that. Celery can pretty much sub in for all of that. There is nothing that mimics the sound of a human body being stabbed with a knife better than a watermelon. And so pretty much every time you hear a human body being stabbed with a knife in any film ever, some dude or some lady was in the Foley with a watermelon and a knife and acting the psycho. Because it makes a great sound. It's this incredible, true thunk of a piercing of the thing, and then the flesh, you can hear the flesh part. So it works really, really well. So yeah, so Foley can be a great thing. Squishing mud sounds are often just things you have, you know, in your own house that will work. I have done mud before using this is awful because even just thinking it makes me go, cold oatmeal. You make a big batch of oatmeal with just barely enough water so the oatmeal absorbs it all. You let it get cold and you let it get solid, and then you get the microphone down close and you get your hands in it. And when you squish it, it does that squishy mud thing. So I was picking oatmeal out from underneath my fingernails for weeks. It's like, how is it still there? Because oatmeal sticks, because oatmeal is like glue. So it sticks underneath your fingers. But yeah, so The thing that I love about the world of audio right now is that there is such a absolutely dramatic, amazing amount of inventiveness happening with the way people are using sound and the way they're responding. One that is on the expanded audio portion of the things, or the expanded boundaries, is called Seen But Not Heard. And the story is of a woman who suddenly loses her hearing. And the scenes alternate between what's happening in the world and what a hearing person would hear, and then what she has with her. She's down to like 13% hearing or something, and the amount of interiority she hears. Like, if you put your own fingers in your ears, you can hear your blood, right? You can hear that move. And there's things that affect you that are not exterior sounds, and Seen Not Heard plays with that in such a dramatic and wonderful way, to kind of help you get the idea of what is it like to not have hearing and to not be able to hear people clearly. Um, yeah, Crystal, the thing about can you wear gloves? Sure, if I had been doing a scene where I was wearing clothes to get in the mud, that would be great. But the character at the time was barefoot. And so we needed the bare skin slap against the mud. We tried it with gloves on to save, and it just didn't sound right. So that's the thing. A lot of Foley is trial and error. And a lot of building a really great audio show right now is trial and error, because people keep trying new ways of telling story and new ways of bringing things to the fore. And the final thing is, I think something that we had that was a kind of a big sense of reality before COVID was that, people listen to podcasts when they commute. They listen to podcasts when they go to the gym to work out. They listen to podcasts, at work on lunchtime, or that sort of thing. And then all of that kind of, I don't know, went away. COVID. And what we're finding is that audio fiction is different than the talking heads nonfiction podcasts. Those nonfiction podcasts, which were just candy for people, they can listen to any episode at any time. They're not as appealing, evidently, judged on the numbers of listeners we're seeing. They're not as appealing in COVID time. But on the other hand, audio fiction stories where you're getting to know a character, and it's a very intimate art form because the character is literally in your ears, and you're getting to know characters in very, very intimate situations often, as I said, in a therapist's office or in a life-threatening situation. And what's happening with that is that we're seeing a strong pattern of people listening and binging audio fiction the way that they binge television shows on Netflix or Prime or Hulu. And that is having a dynamic effect on the industry. Right now, Hollywood is prowling, and they're coming around and they're listening and they're asking for contracts for people. So I expect to see a lot of podcasters that are out there right now that have great stories getting picked up for Hollywood. And that's, money in our pockets. So yeah, listening while you need to lie in the dark and blindfold yourself. That I do that too, Quinn. I have migraines, and that's how I discovered audio in the first place, because I have the light bursts. And so I have to have a totally dark room, and I have to lie still or I get sick. So audio, I can't even read, and I read all the time. But so audio has been a real lifesaver for that. And Crystal listens when gardening, but yeah, that's about it. LeVar Burton. Yeah. So is there anything you'd recommend for making a variety of weird, spacey sounds? Oh my God. Buy yourself a kit of children's instruments. The weirdo plastic instruments that they sell for preschools and stuff like that. And then get yourself one other thing, and that's a whirly tube. And when you combine like the whistle or the fake clarinet that comes in a children's instrument pack with the whirly tube, it makes the most amazing, wonderful sound. And it creates a very spacey like effect. The same, if you heard earlier when I talked about the creek box using the cup, if you make that same apparatus, and you can find it if you just go solo cup creek box, then you can use that same thing, but you have someone else hold the stick and the cup out so the string is pulled a little bit taut, and then you run a violin bow along it. Somebody did it with a kitchen spatula that they ran along it. They did the same thing, and it'll cause the cup to kind of whine at you in interesting ways that can create interesting outer space sounds. Space lasers, believe it or not, pew pew, it sounds funny, but the human voice making shooting sounds and then manipulating them with sound comes really damn close to everything we think of as a space laser. So, that's because it's the same thing. We know that guns, for example, don't sound the way they do in Hollywood movies. But we all think of the gun having that big percussive sound and that sort of echo, that pew as the rifle bullet goes out. And real guns don't sound like that, but everyone thinks they do because of Hollywood. Well, space lasers are kind of the same. Everyone says that space lasers are basically, if they become a thing, they would be silent. But the pew pew is part of it. So, and that's a big part of finding your way through audio fiction. So I'm going to share my screen just real briefly, and then I'll dump out of here and come and join you guys in the chat. I want to show you, this is the list that I have, which is just highlighted audio for introduction to audio fiction. So it's just a straight, PDF list that will allow you to see each of the titles I had on the thing and what they're about, in case you want to search any of those up. And in the meantime, hit me up on Twitter at Eddie Louise, and I will be super happy to recommend individuals and connect you to great shows, which are absolutely an amazing way to spend your time. So I'm going to close out the video here, and then I'll meet you in Toast A in just a moment.